like you to turn with us this morning to the book of Judges, the 16th chapter, starting at the 18th verse. Judges 16 and 18. Then I'd like you to turn over to the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter and the 25th verse. Hebrews, the 11th chapter, Judges, the 16th chapter, and the 18th verse. Last week we had a great time. Brother Carl Puritan's brother, Paul, I hadn't preached for them in years, and Paul came up to me, and I had told them mentally I'm about 75% of what I used to be. So after he asked me, he said, "Can you still preach?" And I said, "Well, if the Lord shows up, I can." And after services, they had dinner at church, and I sat down by Paul and his wife, and she said to me, she said, "I'm just glad you was at 75%. If you was at 100%, we'd have had to left. We couldn't have stood it." So I thank God for what little bit He gives us. You know, the grass is always greener on the other side. All my life I've watched cows. I'm not comparing him to a cow. But we watch cows walk up to a fence, and they've got acres and acres of grass on their side of the fence, and one of the first things they want to do is get on the fence, push their heads over, and eat. I've seen them take and turn their heads and put it between the fence. I've seen them get out on their knees under the last strand of wire, run their tongues out a foot long, and just try to get what's on the other side. I've seen them get hung in barbed wire trying to eat off of the other side. When I was growing up, I said, I'll be glad when I get away from home. I'm tired of telling me what to do, and once I leave, nobody will ever tell me what to do anymore. Boy, was I wrong. I've been told what to do all my life. They tell me what I've got to pay and how much for my food. They tell me how fast that I can drive. You have to go to bed at a certain time, so you get up at a certain time, so that you have to be at work at a certain time. The government says you get this much money, but you're going to give me that much of the money. So we're all told what to do. So it's an illusion for you to think that life is fair because it's not fair. What we call fair. Life intrudes on the personal things that we want in life. Now this morning we're going to preach several chapters, or we're going to preach the life of a man that you've all heard about. Some people call him the strongest man in the Bible. He wasn't. Not the strongest. His name's Samson. We talk about him being very muscular. He wasn't. All the things that we picture about Samson, the Bible does not verify who and what that he was. Samson's power came in one thing, the Spirit of God. He was like us, a normal man, without power, without strength, but when the Spirit of God came upon him, he became a superhuman being to execute the will and the work of God. That's in relationship. We cannot, as human beings, please God, have power in our lives until we're saved and the Holy Spirit comes to live in our life. Then we become victorious. If we'll let the Lord do His leading through the power of His Spirit. If we don't, we're still spiritual weak. So in the book of Judges, 16th chapter, 18th verse, and when Delilah, 18th verse, 16th chapter, and when Delilah saw that he told her, notice these words, all his heart. When he exposed and expelled and opened up, told her all his heart. She sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up this once, for he has shewed me all his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came to her and brought money in their hands. So there was something in exchange that she got from getting Samson to tell her everything that she wanted to know. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man and caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head, and began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines be upon Samson. And he awoke out of the sleep and said, I will go out as the other times before and shake myself. Now notice the next part of the verse. And he winced not that the Lord was departed from him. Now that tells me that Samson had been relying on himself to execute God's will. And he had forgotten that God was the power within his life. The obedience to God was the power in Samson's life. And when God departed out of him and departed from him, it meant that he took his power away from him. So everything that Samson could do until this present time, it was accomplished by the Spirit and the power of God, and not by his will or his strength. But the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass. And he did grind in the prison house, howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. Now, Israel was in captivity for 400 years down in Egypt. God sent Moses, delivered them across the Red Sea, but because of the disobedience of Moses, they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Then when they got ready to go over into the land, the promised land of milk and honey, and the Canaan land, God told Moses, you can't go, I'm going to let you look at it, but you can't go. He appointed Joshua to lead them, and Israel became victorious through Joshua's leading. But eventually, Israel began to creep away from the will of God and the work of God and the companionship of God. And when he did this, Israel got so backslid away from the Lord, but it says they had no king to lead them. They had no leader. So God said, I'm going to appoint you judges. Now, God does not choose people most of the time to do his work and to do his will that are highly intelligent. That's the reason I got saved and called to preach. He does not choose people that are powerful with a lot of strength. He does not choose people that have a lot of money. That does not mean he does not do it. Sometimes he does. But he chooses the other kind of people in order to accomplish his will, to confound the wise, where there's no way possible for God to use that person. It's through his will and his power that he uses. Now there are 13 judges. Now these judges that you'll find, they are the ones that God had them to bring deliverance to Israel. Not by their brilliance, not by their money, not by their power, or any of these things, but by the Spirit of God. So when you study the 13 judges that he gave them, these men were able to deliver Israel out of captivity that they would get themselves into by the power of God. Now, Samson was the last judge of Israel. The last man to judge Israel. And we're going to find some interesting things about Samson and why he was the last judge and why the Bible foretells that he's the last judge. The first thing it talks about Samson doing after that he was born, that he went down to the land of the Philistines and he found a woman. Now this is in the 15th chapter, in the 14th chapter. He found a woman and he went back home to his mom and dad. And the reason that he did that, you had to have arranged marriages. How would you like for your mom and daddy to have picked the one for you to marry? thinking, but they didn't like it. I wanted the ones that would please me. You know why? Because I knew more than what they did. And I'm going to show you why. So Samson went back home to Mom and Daddy and said, I found me a woman. And I want you to go down and get her for me. So they need to go down and make the arrangement of marriage for him to get married. And the mama and the daddy said, of all the women that is of your people, of the Israelites, all the ones that you've dated, it's in there. All the ones that you've dated, all the ones that you've gone with, haven't you found anybody that you like? Think on that. He said, no, I haven't. But here's the words he said. This one pleased me. This one pleased me. So what did he mean by being pleased? Oh, you light up my life. She's the one. She has everything that I want. Now you're talking about discouraging to a mom and daddy. Some of the things they bring home. I remember when Tracy, our oldest, she got ready to go on her first date. And I went downstairs to the family room, and I told Barbara, I said, now when he gets here, you send him down to me. I'm going to put the fear of God in. And he was a football player. And I said, sit down. God gave me a deep voice, sometimes you got to use it. I said, I'm going to tell you something before you go out with my daughter. This is the first date. She's a good girl when she leaves, and she better be a good girl when she comes back. Don't let this preaching thing fool you. I said, I will be all over you. That's my daughter. He broke down and started crying. Man, I mean, boo-hooing. This is what he said. I love her and want to marry her. Lord, he hadn't even been out with her. I took off, went upstairs, and I said, Barbara, get down, we're in a mess. He's crying and wants to marry her. Last one I would have chosen for. So down through the years, when our daughters began to grow up, I thought that I picked out the ones that I liked, that I knew, that had the right kind of attitude, had the right kind of job, had everything that a man needs to offer my daughter. But that's not what they picked. And do you know them son-in-laws and them daughter-in-laws, they're sneaky. They will appear one way, but boy, when they get them, then the real self shows up. So Samson said, she pleases me. So Mom and Dad, they load up, they head down to make the arrangements. On the way down, when they came to the city, there was a vineyard. It said there was a lion came out roaring against Samson. His mom and daddy was not present, and Samson just picked him up without a club or a gun or a spear or anything, and it said he tore him apart, just as you would take a baby goat and just tear it. Went on to the city, made the arrangements, they went back home, and later on, Samson was going back to get married to this Philistine woman that pleased him, that Mom and Dad had made the arrangements with. So there were 30 people in the wedding party, and his friend was along with him. On the way back, Samson said, I think I'll stop and check out that lion that I killed on the way down. And when he got there, bees had built a nest in it, and there was a honeycomb. And so he reached inside, he ate the honey, gave to his mom, dad, and he went on down to make arrangements, or the arrangements had been made. He's getting ready to marry his wife. Now, he got to the wedding party, and they were going to have a feast for 7 days. We know the riddle that he set up, and he said, he told the men there, he said, if you can tell me the riddle within this feast days, these 7 days, he said, I will give you 7 garments, or 30 garments and 30 sheets. They couldn't find the riddle in their own mind, so they went to his wife. And they said to his wife, he's come down here in order to rob us. We don't understand the riddle, but if you don't tell us the riddle, we're going to burn you, your mama, your daddy, your brothers, your sisters. We're going to annihilate your whole family. Now this woman that pleased him was not going to bring pleasure to him now. Now what does that tell us? That tells us that the pleasures of this world does not bring forth the pleasure of the soul. So it says that she began to cry. Now if there's anything that I can't hardly stand is a crying woman. I can tolerate it more now than I used to. Right, Miss Barbara? Yes. I used to say, why are you crying? She said, I don't know. That's just part of something that's in a woman's chemical makeup, I guess. When Tracy was little, every time something would happen, she'd go to crying. And she said to me one day she said, Daddy, she never called me Daddy, she called me Diddy. She couldn't say it when she was a little girl. She said, Diddy, said, well, I cry when I get grown. I said, honey, I don't know. Your mama has. So you never know. So it said that she pressed him and she cried for 7 days. Now that get on my nerves. And not only that, she kept saying to him, you don't love me. You don't love me. You don't love me. You don't. Man, that'll make you pull your hair out. That is crazy. And finally, Samson said, you know, I've not even told my mama and my daddy about this. And so she cried, and she said, you don't love me. And so finally he said, I'm going to tell you the riddle. She went and told those men the riddle. They came and told him, and it made Samson angry. And so he went out, and he slew 30 men. He took the sheets, he took the garments, and he came down, and he gave them. Now, notice this. This woman pleased him, but after the betrayal, he got blow-jawed and pooch-lipped. And he went back home with mama. Then after a while, all of this got to kindling in his heart, so he got him a little baby goat, and he went down to see his wife again. Now, he had not seen her since he got married to her, but she pleased him. And when he got there, his dad-in-law had given her to his best friend. Man. And Samson became infuriated. The dad-in-law said, well, we thought that you just abandoned her and didn't love her. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you her younger sister, which is prettier than him, than she is, and you can have her. But now see, the younger didn't please him, the older one pleased him. So Samson went out and he caught 300 fox. He tied their tails together, he made a torch, he set them on fire, and he turned them loose. It burned the fields of the Philistines. It burned the corn, it burned the stacks that they had cut and stacked up together. And so that the Bible says that those men carried through with a promise, went and took his wife and his daddy, her daddy, and took the kindred, and they burned them with fire. Now Samson is not having a good day, is he? The woman that pleased him brought destruction. And so then Samson said, I'm going to get even. So as they were going along, Samson found the jawbone of a young donkey. It was fresh. And it said by hip to hip, he took and he killed 1,000. 1,000. Now, when he did this, the Bible said, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. He was not powerful until the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. He slew 1,000 men. After he threw 1,000 men, he thought he was going to die of thirst. Now, that's some fierce fighting. I don't know whether it took 5 minutes or 5 hours or all day long, but he told the Lord, he said, I'm going to die of thirst. And then it said that the Lord took his finger and he carved out of the jawbone a place and filled with water, and he refreshed himself. And then he left, went to a place, went to a rock. Now, the Philistines left, and they came where Judah was. Now, Judah was a tribe of Israel. And so they said, why have you come against us? What have we done? And they said, well, Samson, he burned our fields, he slew our men, and we're fixing to get even with him. So it says that Judah took 3,000 men. Now you got one cat out here. And they took 3,000. They figured he done killed 1,000, so they better triple up. So they did 3,000. And they told Samson, they said, we've come out to bind you and deliver you over to the hands of the Philistines. Samson said, if I let you bind me, you won't kill me, will you? They said, no, we promise that we won't kill you. So Samson was taken. And when he stood before the Philistines, he took and he broke the bands that they had put on him, just like you would take a piece of weed and throw it into the fire. It was gone. He defeated the Philistines. Victory. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Then it says that he went down and he saw a harlot. I think he had a problem with women, don't you? He went down and he went in to a harlot. It's in the 16th chapter, the first verse. And so the Philistines gathered around and they said, we're going to take him. But we're going to stay out here all night. He does not know we're here. When he comes out, we're going to take him. At midnight, Samson got up. It says that he went to the gates of the city. He picked the gates, tore the gates off, even the posts, even the hardware, and he carried them all and set them on the hill. The Spirit of God came upon him. The power of God. Not by his strength, not because he was muscular, but the Spirit of God was giving power to Samson. Then in the 4th verse, here comes another woman. It says, he loved a woman. The first woman pleased him. The harlot met the physical needs of him. But this woman, he loved. He loved. Let me caution you girls. Let me caution you boys. When you're looking for a husband, or if you're getting to the age of dating, don't look for somebody that's good looking. That's the first thing you don't want to do. Those good looking ones, they're the well, I don't know how to describe it. I don't have the adjective in my vocabulary to describe. Leave them alone. You know why? They are sold on themselves. They're number one in their lives. If you're looking for someone to date, if you're looking for somebody to marry, the first thing that you need to do, you need to ask God to do the picking and you leave it alone. And if you don't believe that's true, you look around and see what a mess a lot of people have made in their lives. Because God will not make you take the right one. He allows you to choose what you want. So there needs to be consultation. There needs to be somebody out there. I believe that every person has somebody in this world that is a mate for them. I believe that with all my heart. I found mine the first go around. Oh, Miss Barbara thrilled my heart when I saw her. I'll have to share this with you. There were 4 of them standing. Barbara was the last one, but she was the first one that I looked at. And there was a dance. I went to the first one in the dance. I was making her wait. And I danced with the second one, making her wait. And the third one, making her wait. When I got to her, she was mad. And she said, I knew that I was better looking than all the rest of them. I said, I know it. But I said, anticipation and waiting makes the heart grow fond. So thank God I got the right one the first time. I wasn't saved, didn't ask God, but God, I guess somewhere down the road, He knew what He was going to do in my life, and I needed her in order to complete me. So it will soon be 51 years, and we hadn't divorced yet. Talked about it, but never went through with the action of it. So he loved a woman. Delilah must have been beautiful, because this is the first time that it's ever mentioned that he loved a woman. Now the period that we're talking about went over 20 years. Now when you read this, it seems like it just happened simultaneously. But it didn't. This was a period of years that all these things began to take place. And immediately, when he loved that woman, and the Philistines knew that he was there with Delilah, and it may a year have gone by, 2 years may have gone by, but when it came to their knowledge, it said that the Philistines went to Delilah and said, I tell you what, you find out where the power of this man is, and we're going to richly reward you. Now this was more than one lord, more than 10 lords, but said, we're going to give you 28 pounds of silver, each of us. Now that's a lot of money. Now the Philistines thought that Delilah was loyal to them, and she wasn't. And Samson thought Delilah was loyal to him. She wasn't. Delilah was loyal to Delilah. And why? Because of money. Money is the root of all evil. She desired money more than she desired Samson. She didn't fear the Philistines. They didn't threaten to burn her, but reward her. So here she goes in and said, come here, Peter boy. Come over here. If you tell me where your power is, oh, I just want to know. Well, Samson said, if you bind me with 7 green weeds or 7 pieces of green grass, I'll be rendered powerless. She did, said the Philistines be on it. He broke them. She said, why do you hate me? I'm in love with you. I love you. Now this plays on your heartstrings if you love somebody and they start telling you that they love you. I love you, darling. I love you, honey. You're the apple of my eye. You're the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen in my life. Sway. So Samson, he came and he said, well, if you bind me with new ropes. The Bible said he bound them with new ropes. Same thing happened again. Now, I want you to notice something. He said, if you take these 7 locks, braids of hair that I've got on my head, if you take these 7 and you take as a weaver the thing that they put on to weave cloth, if you take the cloth, you got to study this to see it. If you take the cloth, put it in my hair, and you weave it, and you put it up on top, and you take a pin and you put it in it in order to tighten it, I'll be just like other men. She did. Nothing happened. Now, why did he have 7 locks on his head? First of all, he was a Nazarite. A Nazarite had a vow, and he was vowed from his mother's womb that his hair would never be cut. Second thing is that he had 7 locks. The Bible teaches us about 7. I'm just going to give you a few of them instead of going through all of them. It said, in the beginning God created heaven and earth and everything therein. 6 days, 7th day he rested. So if it just took God 7 days, he had completed his work. It said when Noah filled the ark, that when he put the animals on, how did they go in? Is that right? Some of them did, but the others went in how? 7 by 7. The unclean animals went in 2 by 2s, and the clean went in 7 by 7s. That means completion. Why did the clean animals go in 7 by 7? It's because when Noah landed, he was going to have to offer sacrifices to God. If there was only 2 and you killed one of them, how would the other one be able to bear any more offspring by himself? So God made provision, 7 in completion. When they got ready to go into Jericho, God said, march around Jericho 7 times, and the 7th day march around it 7 times and blow the trumpet. Jacob had to work for Rachel for 7 years. So the word 7 in the Bible, and this is just a few of them, it appears hundreds of times. The 7 locks on his head meant the completion of the judges. There would not be any more judges after Samson. Then they would go to kings after Samson. Saul would become the first king. So then she said, you don't love me, you don't love me, you don't love me. Listen, love is giving oneself to another. Love is sacrificing oneself to another. Love is not selfish. Love is not out to get what you want, but love is giving more than what you give. You don't give because you might get something in return. You give because you do love. That's why the Bible said that God gave his only begotten Son. Because of love. Because of love. So Samson, bless his sweetheart, woman problems. So he told her the truth. That's why the Bible said when she saw it in his eyes, saw it in his actions, heard it in his voice, when she saw that he had opened his heart and given truth.